Buildings are never just walls and windows. They carry echoes of dreams, memories, and even madness. In Blueprints from the Afterlife, we explore how unseen forces shape the spaces we live in. From ancient temples born from visions, to haunted houses like the Winchester Mystery House, to modern cities designed with AI-driven dreams, each episode uncovers the strange blueprints behind our world. Are some buildings shaped by ghosts? Can a dream design a cathedral? Can madness reveal hidden patterns? Step inside and discover how every structure tells a story, written by the living and the unseen. Long ago, before cities rose from stone and wood, people believed dreams were maps drawn by forces beyond the waking world. In the dark hours of the night, visions came like whispers, shaping the way they built their homes, temples, and tombs. In ancient Egypt, dreams carried the weight of divine messages. A pharaoh might wake from sleep certain that the gods had spoken. In Greece, dream temples called Asclepia welcomed those seeking healing or guidance. Visitors slept inside these sacred spaces, hoping to receive visions that would reveal cures or answers. Across the ocean, Native American tribes held ceremonies where dreams connected them to ancestors. These dreams guided not only personal choices, but also decisions for the tribe, including where to build lodges or meeting grounds. Imagine a young Egyptian architect kneeling beside a flickering oil lamp as dawn crept over the Nile. The night before, the pharaoh had dreamed of a great tomb unlike any before it. In the dream, he had walked through a passage lined with stars, each glowing in the darkness. At the end of the passage stood a vast chamber filled with water, reflecting the ceiling like the night sky. The pharaoh believed this vision came from Osiris, god of the afterlife. He called upon the architect and described every detail. The task was clear: bring the dream into the world of the living. The architect knew this would not be simple. Carving a passage long enough to hold hundreds of star carvings required careful planning. Creating a chamber filled with water deep within the earth meant solving problems no one had faced before. But to refuse would dishonor the pharaoh and risk angering the gods. Over many months, he drew plans based on the dream. Workers carved tunnels through limestone, guided by his designs. Artists chiseled constellations into the walls. Engineers devised a system to bring water underground without flooding the rest of the tomb. When the work ended, the final chamber matched the vision almost exactly. For those who entered, it felt as if they had stepped inside the dream itself. This practice of using dreams as blueprints was not limited to Egypt. The Greeks kept records of visions received in their dream temples. Priests would listen as visitors described what they saw during the night. These descriptions were written down on scrolls, forming some of the first dream diaries. Over time, patterns emerged. A dream of standing on a bridge, for example, might be interpreted as a sign to build a new road or aqueduct. These records guided decisions about where to place temples, how to shape their columns, and even how to arrange cities. In Native American traditions, dreams held deep meaning for the entire community. Elders would gather to hear the dreams of warriors and hunters. If someone dreamed of a flowing river, it might signal the location of new fishing grounds. A dream of an eagle circling a hill could inspire the placement of a council lodge at that site. These decisions were not made lightly. The dreamer's words carried the voices of ancestors, and the structures built in response were treated with reverence. Archaeologists have uncovered fragments of ancient dream diaries, though many have been lost to time. In one fragment from Egypt, a scribe recorded a series of dreams the pharaoh experienced before building a temple. The entries described visions of lions, boats sailing through the sky, and a golden tree. When researchers compared the descriptions to the temple ruins, they found carvings that matched these symbols exactly. It suggested that the temple was more than a place of worship. It was a dream brought into stone. The story of the architect who built the star-lined tomb survives through a few faded inscriptions. One inscription shows him standing beside the pharaoh, pointing to a carved wall of constellations. Another depicts workers hauling blocks of limestone by torchlight, the shapes of stars etched into the stone. Though his name has been worn away by centuries of sand and wind, his work endures. Every tunnel and chamber speaks of a night when visions shaped reality. These ancient builders saw no divide between the world of sleep and the waking world. To them, a dream was not a fleeting image to be forgotten at sunrise. It was a plan, a message, a set of instructions waiting to be followed. When they closed their eyes, they stepped into a workshop where gods and ancestors served as guides. When they opened them again, they carried those designs into the light, carving them into stone, wood, and earth. Today, we might see these beliefs as myth, yet the structures they left behind still rise from the desert, the forest, and the ruins of ancient cities. They remind us that long ago, the line between dreaming and building was thin, and that the first architects worked not only with tools and materials, but also with visions born in the dark silence of sleep. Salvador Dalí believed dreams were doorways to creativity. He often sat in a chair with a heavy brass key balanced between his fingers. Beneath his hand, on the floor, he placed a small metal plate. As he drifted toward sleep, his muscles would relax, the key would slip, and the clatter on the plate would wake him. This moment between waking and sleeping, called the hypnagogic state, brought flashes of strange images. Dalí claimed these fragments came from the hidden depths of his mind, untouched by logic. He would immediately sketch what he saw: melting clocks, floating elephants, or endless barren landscapes. Many of his most famous paintings began this way. For him, the dream world was not a distant realm. It was a studio where ideas formed before he ever touched a brush. Around the same time in Barcelona, Antoni Gaudí was shaping stone and iron into forms that looked like something pulled from a dream. His masterpiece, the Sagrada Familia, still rises over the city like a vision come to life. Gaudí did not follow conventional designs. He studied the natural curves of trees and the flow of rivers, then imagined how those shapes could become columns, arches, and towers. Some of his ideas, he said, came to him in dreams. One night, he dreamed of a forest with trunks stretching toward the sky. When he woke, he designed the church's interior to echo that forest, each column branching like a tree. Visitors who stand inside today often feel as if they are walking through a dream, surrounded by stone leaves and shafts of light that fall like sunlight through branches. In modern times, dream-inspired design has become more personal. A well-known architect once took on an unusual project. A client who kept a detailed dream journal wanted a house built entirely from those nightly visions. The journal described rooms that shifted in shape, staircases that curved like waves, and windows that opened onto impossible landscapes. At first, the architect doubted the idea could work, but as he read page after page, he began to see patterns. Certain images repeated, like a circular room with no doors or a skylight shaped like an eye. He used these recurring symbols as a guide. The finished house was unlike anything he had built before. It had hallways that twisted unexpectedly, rooms that changed in size through clever use of mirrors, and a central space lit only by a round window at the top. The client said living there felt like walking inside their own dreams. The project proved that architecture could capture the private world of the mind as much as the physical world outside. Dreams have also shaped discoveries in science and engineering. Nikola Tesla often spoke of his machine visions. He would see entire inventions in his mind while awake, as clear as if they were already built. He claimed these visions appeared suddenly, like waking dreams. When designing his alternating current motor, Tesla saw it fully formed in his mind before he ever drew a diagram. He could rotate the imagined machine, test it, and spot flaws without touching a single piece of metal. Once he felt satisfied, he simply built what he had already seen. His process blurred the line between dreaming and thinking, turning imagination into working technology. The power of dreams reaches beyond machines and structures. Paul McCartney once woke with a melody in his head so complete that he assumed he must have heard it before. He sat at a piano and played the tune exactly as it had come to him. At first, he gave it nonsense lyrics about scrambled eggs, just to remember the rhythm. Later, those words became the song Yesterday, one of the most famous songs in history. McCartney often said the song felt like a gift from his dreaming mind. It was as if his subconscious had been composing while he slept, waiting for him to wake and listen. Modern science has begun to explain how this happens. Neuroscientists studying dreams have found that during sleep, the brain does not rest in silence. Instead, it reshapes memories and searches for patterns. Problems we struggle with while awake are sometimes solved in dreams because the sleeping brain works without the limits of logic. This process is called incubation. For example, a scientist stuck on a complex equation may wake with the answer fully clear. A designer trying to solve a structural problem may dream of a shape that works perfectly. These solutions seem magical, but they are the result of the brain exploring ideas in a freer state. One researcher described an experiment in which volunteers were given puzzles before bed. Half of them were told to focus on the problem as they fell asleep. In the morning, those who had concentrated on the puzzle were more likely to have solved it in a dream. This finding suggested that we can guide our sleeping minds toward creative work. It is the same principle Dalí used with his key-nap method, or Tesla used with his waking visions. The boundary between sleep and invention is thin, and some of history's breakthroughs have crossed it. Imagine a modern engineer working late on a design for a bridge. The supports keep failing in her simulations. Frustrated, she goes to bed thinking about the problem. In the early morning, she dreams of walking across a forest where roots weave together to form a natural arch. When she wakes, the image stays with her. She sketches a new design based on those interlaced roots. Later, when she tests it, the structure holds. The dream provided a shape her waking mind had never considered. Dreams continue to influence art, architecture, science, and music because they offer a view beyond reason. Dalí caught fleeting images in the space between waking and sleeping. Gaudí turned visions of nature into stone and light. Tesla saw machines fully formed in his mind. McCartney woke to a melody that seemed to arrive from nowhere. In each case, the dream state revealed possibilities hidden during the day. Even now, as neuroscience begins to map the brain's nocturnal work, the mystery remains. Dreams still shape the world around us, whether they rise as paintings, cathedrals, inventions, or songs. H.P. Lovecraft filled his stories with dark visions drawn from his own dreams. He often woke in a panic, covered in sweat, with fragments of monstrous cities still clinging to his mind. These dreams were not soft or beautiful. They were jagged and cold, full of impossible angles and buildings that seemed alive. In one tale, The Shadow on the Chimney, a crumbling house becomes a gateway to a realm shaped by nightmare logic. The walls seem to stretch when no one is looking. Staircases twist into spirals that lead nowhere. The story captures the terror of a dream where space itself feels wrong. Lovecraft's descriptions are so precise that readers often wonder if he had seen these places in some other world. He once admitted that many of his settings came directly from what he saw in sleep, unfiltered and untouched by reason. For Lovecraft, dreams were warnings. They revealed hidden fears and ancient dangers in his stories. A dream might show a map of a ruined city beneath the ocean or a temple buried in the desert. These visions guided his characters, but never toward safety. Instead, they drew them deeper into darkness. The dream became both a clue and a trap, luring them closer to the horror they hoped to avoid. When they finally reached the real location, it matched the dream exactly. That uncanny moment, when the imagined and the real merged, created a terror that felt inevitable. The dream was not just a picture in the mind, it was a prophecy. This idea of dreams shaping the world is not limited to fiction. Psychologists speak of the subconscious as a hidden architect. While we sleep, our minds arrange memories and fears into symbols. A staircase that never ends might represent anxiety. A locked door could symbolize a secret or a trauma. When we wake, these symbols linger, influencing the choices we make without us realizing it. Over time, they can even shape our surroundings. Someone who dreams repeatedly of water may be drawn to live near the ocean or design a home with flowing lines and pools. A person haunted by dreams of confinement might fill their house with wide windows and open spaces. The inner world leaves its mark on the outer one. One artist took this idea to an extreme. She began keeping a dream journal after suffering a series of vivid nightmares. Each night, she woke and wrote down every detail. The dreams often featured labyrinths, endless corridors, shifting walls, doors that opened into more doors. At first, she thought they were just reflections of stress. But as the months passed, she noticed recurring patterns. Certain symbols appeared again and again: a broken mirror, a flickering light, a narrow bridge suspended over darkness. She began sketching these elements, turning her journal entries into rough blueprints. Eventually, she decided to bring the dreams into the physical world. She rented an abandoned warehouse and started building what she called haunted labyrinths. The first installation was small, just a few connected rooms with dim lighting and uneven floors. Visitors reported feeling disoriented, even frightened, as they moved through it. Encouraged, she expanded the project. She built corridors that curved unexpectedly, ceilings that rose and fell without warning, and hidden passages that forced visitors to retrace their steps. The spaces were not dangerous, but they unsettled people on a deep level. Some said the labyrinth felt familiar, as if they had walked through it in a dream before. As her work grew more complex, she relied heavily on her journal. Each morning, she reviewed the latest entry and searched for new symbols. If she dreamed of a door half submerged in water, she found a way to include it. If a hallway seemed to pulse like a heartbeat, she designed one with shifting lights that mimicked that rhythm. The labyrinths became living maps of her subconscious, built with wood, metal, and shadow. They did not tell a clear story. Instead, they invited visitors to experience the strange logic of dreams. One night, while building a new section, the artist had a dream that disturbed her deeply. She saw herself walking through the very labyrinth she was constructing. In the dream, she turned a corner and found a room she had never designed. Inside stood a mirror, cracked down the middle, reflecting a figure that was not her. When she woke, she went to the warehouse and checked that spot. To her shock, a small empty room existed there, exactly as in the dream. She swore she had never built it, nor had anyone else. It felt as though the dream had created it on its own. This moment blurred the boundary between her inner world and the physical space. Visitors later described that same room as the most unsettling part of the labyrinth. Some refused to enter, saying they felt watched. The artist never explained what had happened. She simply added the cracked mirror and left the room as it was. It became a silent center of the installation, a place where dream and reality overlapped. Her work gained attention from psychologists, who saw it as a living experiment. They studied how people reacted to the spaces, measuring heart rates and tracking movement. Many subjects showed signs of stress similar to those experienced during nightmares. The labyrinth seemed to activate deep primal fears. Even those who did not know the artist's dream journal felt its influence. The symbols reached into their subconscious, triggering memories and emotions they could not name. Lovecraft would have understood this power. His stories suggested that dreams are not private. They are shared landscapes, shaped by forces older than humanity. When we dream, we wander through these landscapes, bringing back fragments. In his view, to build a place directly from a dream was to risk opening a door to something vast and dangerous. The artist's labyrinths echoed this idea. Though made of simple materials, they felt alive, as if some hidden will guided their design. Visitors left the installations shaken, sometimes unable to explain why. They spoke of a sense of being lost, not just in space, but in themselves. A hallway might remind them of a childhood memory they had forgotten. A dark corner might trigger a fear they thought they had buried. The labyrinths revealed how much of our inner world remains unseen, shaping our actions and surroundings. Like Lovecraft's characters, the visitors walked through maps of terror drawn by the subconscious, only to find those maps reflected in wood and shadow. The artist continues to keep her journal, adding new entries each night. She never knows what she will dream or what structure will emerge next. The line between her mind and her work has faded. In the end, her labyrinths stand as proof that dreams are not just images we see while we sleep. They are forces that shape the spaces we inhabit, whether through art, architecture, or silent rooms that seem to appear on their own. A ghost can be more than a figure that rattles chains or lingers in shadowed hallways. Sometimes it acts as a guide, shaping the living world long after death. In Shakespeare's Hamlet, the ghost of Hamlet's father is more than a spectral warning. When it speaks the words, "Remember me," it gives Hamlet a command, a blueprint for vengeance. Those words direct every action Hamlet takes. The ghost does not hand him a set of drawings, yet its message builds the path he must follow. Each choice becomes a stone in a structure of revenge, rising until the final bloody act. In this way, the ghost is an architect, creating plans not for a building, but for events. There are stories where the dead influence the physical world more directly. Some buildings seem shaped by spirits as much as by human hands. The Winchester Mystery House in San Jose, California, is the most famous example. Sarah Winchester, widow of the man who owned the Winchester Rifle Company, believed she was haunted by the spirits of those killed by her family's guns. She thought these ghosts demanded constant construction as a form of appeasement, so she hired workers and kept them building day and night. For decades, the house grew without stopping. Rooms appeared and vanished. Staircases led into ceilings. Doors opened to empty space. Visitors who walk through the Winchester House today describe it as a maze of contradictions. A hallway might end in a brick wall. A window might look out on another room instead of the outdoors. Some believe Sarah built these oddities to confuse the ghosts, trapping them in endless loops. Others say the spirits themselves guided her, whispering new designs each night. Whatever the truth, the result is a structure unlike any other, part mansion and part labyrinth. Shaped by fear and unseen hands, the way a building is made can carry echoes of the emotions that created it. A house built in anger or grief may feel heavy and oppressive. Floors might sag, light might fail to reach certain corners, and people might feel uneasy without knowing why. In this sense, hauntings can be built into architecture. The materials absorb the moods of those who design and construct them. When someone walks through later, those feelings rise again like smoke from old ashes. A creaking board becomes more than wood expanding. It becomes a voice retelling a story no one remembers clearly. Some architects have explored this idea deliberately. They design buildings meant to channel or even trap spirits. In certain cultures, temples are laid out to guide the dead along specific paths. Narrow corridors and sharp turns slow wandering souls, keeping them from disturbing the living. Some houses in rural Japan include spirit shelves and hidden alcoves for offerings, physical spaces that acknowledge unseen presences. These designs treat ghosts not as intruders, but as residents with their own needs. The building becomes a kind of treaty between worlds. There are also structures created for darker purposes. Legends tell of prisons built to hold more than human bodies. In one story, a medieval fortress was designed with spiral staircases that always turned to the left. Guards said this confused the spirits of those who died inside, trapping them in a constant circular motion. Another tale describes a Victorian asylum where certain windows were sealed with iron bars, not to keep patients in, but to keep something else from getting out. These stories may be exaggerated, yet they reveal a belief that architecture can act as a barrier between the living and the dead. Sarah Winchester's endless construction can be seen in this light. Each new hallway and secret passage was part of a bargain with the spirits she feared. She believed that as long as the building grew, she would be safe. The moment the hammers stopped, the ghosts would claim her. This fear drove her to add room after room, even when there was no clear purpose. The house itself became a living map of her mind, full of twists, dead ends, and hidden places where terror might hide. Imagine Sarah standing in the glow of a single gas lamp late at night, listening to the creak of the house settling. Somewhere in the darkness, carpenters work on a new stairway. She hears a whisper she cannot place. It might be wind, or it might be something else. She gives instructions for another addition, not knowing why. Only that the house must keep growing. The walls rise as if guided by invisible hands. Each nail driven into wood feels like part of a ritual. In this way, Sarah becomes both builder and medium, her house a message written in timber and plaster. The Winchester House is not the only place where ghostly design leaves a mark. Across the world, certain buildings are said to carry instructions from the dead. In old churches, for instance, some floor plans resemble crosses not only for symbolism, but to create paths for spirits to follow during rites. In catacombs, tunnels often form patterns meant to guide souls toward rest. Even modern skyscrapers sometimes reflect this ancient thinking. In parts of Hong Kong, buildings include open spaces called dragon gates. These gaps allow mythical dragon spirits to pass through without disturbing the structure. It is a practical superstition, built into steel and glass. There are also tales of architects who claim to receive their designs through visions or voices. One story tells of a man who dreamed of a grand theater every night for a year. When he finally drew the plans, he realized they matched a ruined foundation he had never seen before. The building was later constructed on that very site. Some believe the dreamer was channeling the desires of someone long dead, an architect whose plans had been lost but not forgotten. Whether true or not, the story captures a recurring theme: the idea that buildings remember, even when people do not. When someone walks into a place like the Winchester House, they are not just stepping into a structure of wood and stone. They are entering a record of unseen negotiations. Each twist of a hallway, each door that leads nowhere, speaks of choices made in fear, hope, or desperation. The ghosts are not always literal. Sometimes they are memories or emotions given shape. But other times, as Sarah Winchester believed, they are real presences, demanding attention and space. The house continues to stand, its rooms silent yet restless. Visitors move through it like pieces on a game board, following paths laid out by someone they can no longer see. In this way, the ghost remains an architect, shaping not only the building but the experience of those who walk within it. Long after Sarah's death, the design continues to grow in the imagination, a blueprint drawn in whispers and shadows. Cities carry memories the way old houses hold echoes of voices long gone. Streets, bridges, and buildings do more than serve a practical purpose. They become silent witnesses to what happened there. In this sense, memory acts like a ghostly blueprint. It shapes how space feels and how people move through it. Even when the past is invisible, it lingers, influencing design choices in ways that are not always obvious. Sometimes this presence is subtle, like a narrow street that still follows the line of a medieval wall. Other times it is deliberate, a structure built to make sure the past is never forgotten. When trauma is collective, the spaces built to mark it take on a special weight. War leaves ruins that are later rebuilt, but the scars remain in the layout of cities. Entire neighborhoods can disappear, replaced by empty lots or stark monuments. These changes become part of the landscape, reminders of lives cut short and histories rewritten. Walking through such places, people feel more than they see. A plaza that once held public executions carries a different silence than a market square. The ground remembers, even when the buildings have changed. Holocaust memorials are among the clearest examples of how architecture can hold memory. They are not neutral spaces. They are designed to haunt. The memorial to the murdered Jews of Europe in Berlin uses rows of gray concrete slabs of varying heights. At first glance, they look like simple blocks, but as you walk between them, the ground dips and rises, the walls close in, and the sky becomes a thin strip overhead. Visitors often report feeling disoriented, trapped, or watched. This reaction is intentional. The memorial does not tell you what to think through plaques or words. Instead, it makes you feel a fragment of what it means to be lost, to vanish in a system designed to erase you. It turns the act of remembering into a physical experience. Other war monuments use similar strategies. Some create vast open spaces where absence itself is the message. Others build walls covered with names, each letter a reminder of a life once lived. These designs operate like maps of grief. They show where history has ruptured, where entire communities have been removed or destroyed. People who visit them are not just observing the past. They are stepping into a space where the past and present overlap. Urban planning can also carry the weight of memory. In some cities, streets are laid out to avoid certain sites, not because of geography, but because of what happened there. An unmarked field might once have been a mass grave. A public park might cover the remains of a battlefield. Even when nothing visible remains, people often sense something beneath the surface. Developers sometimes face resistance when they try to build on these sites. The living feel an obligation to the dead, a need to leave certain spaces untouched. In this way, memory guides construction as surely as blueprints do. A modern case study shows how haunting can be used deliberately in design. A memorial built in a coastal city was created to honor those lost in a devastating tsunami. The architect studied not only the event, but also the dreams and memories of survivors. Many describe the moment the water came, the sound of rushing waves, and the sudden emptiness that followed. The architect wanted to capture that feeling without using literal imagery. The memorial consists of a series of tall, narrow passages that twist like a maze. As visitors walk through, they hear the faint sound of water recorded from the actual disaster site. The walls are made of dark stone that reflects only small fragments of light. At the center is a wide, open space where a single column of mist rises and disappears into the air. There are no names carved into the walls, no dates, no explanation. The space itself does the speaking. Visitors often emerge silent, as if words have been taken from them. During construction, workers reported strange sensations. Some said they felt watched when they worked alone. Others said they sometimes heard distant voices or the echo of rushing water, even before the sound system was installed. The architect did not dismiss these reports. Instead, he included them in his thinking. He believed the site itself carried memory, that the land wanted to speak through the building. By leaving certain areas unfinished or rough, he allowed that presence to remain visible. The result was a memorial that felt alive, constantly shifting as the light and mist changed. When the memorial opened, survivors visited in groups. Some wept quietly. Others walked the passages again and again. One man, who had lost his entire family, said the space felt like a dream he had been having for years. In the dream, he was always searching for something he could never find. Walking through the memorial, he felt both the searching and the loss. For him, it was not just a building. It was a shared memory made solid. The haunting here was intentional. The architect wanted people to feel unsettled, to confront the absence directly. This approach differs from monuments that offer comfort or closure. Instead of smoothing over the past, it keeps the wound open. The design ensures that the memory of the event cannot fade into the background. Every visit renews the connection, like touching a scar and feeling the pain beneath. The idea of memory as a ghostly blueprint extends beyond memorials. Consider a neighborhood where a factory once stood. The factory is gone, replaced by apartments and shops. Yet the shape of the streets still reflects the old layout. The foundation of the past remains underfoot. People may not know the history, but they live within its outline. This is how memory persists, not always visible, but always present. Sometimes, entire cities function this way. In Warsaw, much of the city was destroyed during World War II. When it was rebuilt, certain districts were reconstructed to match old paintings and maps, while others were left as ruins. Walking through Warsaw today, you move between layers of time. A modern building might stand beside a street rebuilt to look exactly as it did centuries ago. The contrast itself becomes a reminder of what was lost and what survived. Memory has weight, and architecture gives it form. Whether through the haunting silence of a memorial, the careful preservation of a historic street, or the unmarked field that everyone avoids, the past shapes the present. Like ghosts, these memories do not stay buried. They rise in concrete and stone, in the layout of cities and the spaces where people gather. A building can hold stories just as surely as a book can. When we walk through these spaces, we are reading those stories, whether we realize it or not. For centuries, people have linked madness and genius, often seeing them as two sides of the same coin. A mind that sees too much, too deeply, can become unmoored from ordinary life. Vincent van Gogh painted fields that seemed to tremble with light, skies that swirled with motion. His brushstrokes revealed a world alive with energy, but his inner life was filled with storms he could not escape. Friedrich Nietzsche wrote words that shook philosophy to its core, yet his own thoughts spiraled into chaos. Both men are remembered not only for what they created, but for the price they paid. Their visions came from a place most people never reach, a place both brilliant and destructive. Madness can be a kind of map, tracing paths invisible to the rest of us. Some artists and thinkers move through these inner landscapes, bringing back fragments. The Swiss artist Adolf Wolfli lived his entire adult life in a psychiatric hospital. Diagnosed with schizophrenia, he experienced violent hallucinations and delusions. Yet in the midst of this turmoil, he began to draw. What started as small sketches grew into an immense project, thousands of pages filled with images, stories, and songs. His drawings were not random. They formed detailed plans for imaginary cities, vast empires that only he could fully see. Each page was covered in dense patterns of lines and symbols. Wolfli's cities had streets, monuments, and intricate systems of order. To an outsider, they looked chaotic, but within his mind, they were perfectly logical. He built entire worlds from the fragments of his illness, constructing them with the precision of an architect. In his drawings, the boundaries between map and art disappeared. These were not just pictures, but blueprints for a universe that existed only in his imagination. The hospital room became his studio, and his mind became the landscape he explored. Visitors who saw Wolfli's work were often overwhelmed. Some felt they were looking at madness made visible, while others sensed a strange harmony beneath the surface. His creations suggested that even in the midst of disorder, there could be hidden patterns. A doctor once described Wolfli's drawings as a cosmos unfolding on paper. The phrase captured both the scale of the work and its unsettling beauty. Today, his art is celebrated as a prime example of outsider art, but during his life, it was his way of navigating the chaos within. Not all visions come from mental illness, yet they can share the same intensity. Jason was a mathematician obsessed with patterns. As a child, he would lie awake at night, staring at the ceiling, watching shapes form and dissolve behind his eyelids. These were not simple images. They were fractals, complex, repeating structures that seemed to stretch into infinity. At first, he thought they were just dreams. As he grew older, he realized they were connected to the equations he studied. In his early 20s, Jason began having what he called episodes. During these times, he felt his thoughts accelerate until they blurred. Numbers and symbols filled his vision. He saw connections between stars, rivers, veins, and city streets. Everything seemed part of one vast pattern, a network that pulsed with hidden order. Friends worried about his health, but Jason believed these visions were meaningful. He started to sketch what he saw, covering his apartment walls with spirals, grids, and branching lines. One night, during a particularly intense episode, he saw a single shape that seemed to contain all others. It was simple, yet infinitely complex, like a seed holding the blueprint for a forest. When he woke the next morning, he tried to draw it. The image became the foundation for a new mathematical model. Jason called it the madness equation, half jokingly, because it had come to him during what others might call a breakdown. When he shared his work with colleagues, they were stunned. The equation described chaotic systems in a way no one had done before. It showed how apparent randomness could hide a deeper order. Weather patterns, traffic flows, even the spread of disease could be mapped using his formula. What had seemed like wild disorder became predictable when viewed through this lens. Jason's visions, born in moments of instability, revealed a structure that had always been there, waiting to be seen. This idea echoed the principles of chaos theory. In chaos theory, small changes can lead to vast and unexpected outcomes, like a butterfly's wings stirring a distant storm. Systems that seem random often have underlying rules. They are not without order. They follow patterns so complex they appear to be disorder. Jason's equation captured this truth. It was as if his mind had tuned into the deep rhythms of the world, rhythms that most people never notice. There is a parallel between Jason's work and Wolfley's drawings. Both men created maps from inner visions. Wolfley's maps were personal, shaped by his illness and imagination. Jason's maps were mathematical, connecting his private visions to the external world. In both cases, madness acted as a generator. It produced images and ideas that seemed chaotic at first, but revealed hidden structures when examined closely. Van Gogh and Nietzsche also fit this pattern. Their art and philosophy can be seen as maps of the self. Van Gogh's swirling skies and fields are not literal places, but they chart the intensity of his inner experience. Nietzsche's writings trace the peaks and valleys of thought pushed to its limits. Madness, in these cases, is not just destruction. It is a force that breaks boundaries, allowing new forms to emerge. Consider a city viewed from above at night. At first, it looks like random points of light scattered across darkness. But as you look closer, patterns appear. Grids of streets, clusters of neighborhoods, rivers of traffic flowing through the veins of the metropolis. Madness works the same way. Up close, it seems formless, a blur of thoughts and sensations. From a distance, connections become clear. The apparent chaos is actually a map of hidden order. Jason continued to refine his equation, though the episodes never stopped. He kept a journal filled with notes, numbers, and sketches. Some pages were incomprehensible, spirals of symbols with no clear meaning. Others contained breakthroughs that advanced his work. He accepted both as part of the same process. The madness and the clarity were intertwined. One could not exist without the other. In the end, his walls resembled Wolfley's, covered with lines, shapes, and fragments of vision. Anyone entering his apartment might mistake it for the room of an artist rather than a mathematician. In a way, it was both. The boundary between science and art, between sanity and madness, dissolved. What remained was the Nath itself, a record of a mind moving through the strange landscapes of thought. The first asylums were built as fortresses, not places of healing. Their walls were thick, their windows barred, and their corridors narrow and endless. These spaces were not only meant to contain people, but also to reflect society's view of madness. A patient walking through such a place would feel the weight of stone and silence pressing down. The building itself seemed to speak, saying, "You are trapped here, and so is your mind." Over time, the layout of these hospitals began to mirror ideas about mental states. Basements often held the most dangerous or neglected patients. In the dark and damp below ground, the air smelled of mildew and despair. Staff sometimes referred to these levels as hell, not only because of the suffering, but because of the imagery. Going down meant sinking deeper into chaos. At the top floors, near sunlight and open air, were rooms for patients thought to be improving. These spaces were called heaven. The symbolism was clear, a vertical map of the mind, with sanity and clarity at the highest point and madness buried below. Moving a patient upstairs was more than a practical decision. It was a statement of hope, a sign that they might rise again into the light. In this way, the building became a metaphor. Its structure turned treatment into a kind of pilgrimage, each step on the staircase marking progress or decline. The design elements of these hospitals were not accidental. Stairs that curved out of sight added confusion. Long corridors created a sense of endless wandering. Narrow doorways and locked gates controlled movement. Even the barred windows served a dual purpose, they kept patients from escaping, but they also marked them as prisoners of their own minds. A visitor walking through such a place might feel uneasy without knowing why. The architecture itself communicated fear and control. It made madness visible, not through words but through stone and iron. Literature often captures these ideas with uncanny clarity. In Charlotte Perkins Gilman's story, The Yellow Wallpaper, a woman is confined to a single room as part of a so-called rest cure. She begins to fixate on the strange pattern of the wallpaper. At first, it seems random, just lines and shapes, but as her isolation deepens, she starts to see figures moving within it, trapped behind the design. The wallpaper becomes a map of her mind, each swirl and knot representing a piece of her unraveling sanity. By the end, she believes she has merged with the pattern, her body and mind absorbed into the walls around her. The story shows how a physical space can become a supernatural blueprint, reflecting the inner world of madness. Real hospitals have their own unspoken patterns. A patient might know which hallway leads to the locked ward by the change in floor tiles or the way the light dims. Certain rooms are avoided because of their history. Someone died there or there was a violent incident. These details are not written on any plan, yet they shape how people move through the building. Staff and patients create invisible maps based on fear, memory, and rumor. These maps can be as real as the official blueprints. One architect experienced this firsthand during a psychotic episode that changed his life. He was known for his strict, rational designs, sharp lines, minimal ornament, perfect symmetry. But during a period of intense stress, his mind began to fracture. He saw patterns everywhere, on leaves, in puddles, even in cracks on the sidewalk. These patterns felt like messages, as if the world itself was speaking to him. At night, he dreamed of buildings that breathed, their walls expanding and contracting like lungs. He became obsessed with these visions, sketching them compulsively. Friends worried for his health, but he refused to stop. He believed the visions held the key to a new kind of architecture. In one dream, he saw a house built entirely from living plants, its walls woven from vines and roots. Sunlight filtered through leaves instead of windows. The structure shifted with the seasons, growing and changing like a living organism. When he woke, he began to design this house in detail. After weeks of intense work, his psychosis peaked. He was hospitalized, placed in a ward not unlike those he had once visited for research. From his bed, he studied the layout of the hospital. The narrow hallways, locked doors, and barred windows felt suffocating. Yet he also noticed how sunlight entered certain spaces and how airflow moved through vents. Even in confinement, his mind kept mapping and designing. When he recovered enough to leave, he carried these observations with him. Back in his studio, he combined his visions with what he had learned in the hospital. The result was a groundbreaking, sustainable design. Instead of cold, lifeless materials, he used natural elements. Walls of packed earth, roofs of living plants, water systems that recycled themselves. The layout encouraged healing. Open courtyards replaced locked corridors. Sunlight reached every room. The building felt alive, not oppressive. Patients who entered reported feeling calmer, as if the space itself helped them heal. His design challenged old ideas about how hospitals should function. It suggested that architecture could either trap the mind or free it. By blending his psychotic visions with practical engineering, he created something entirely new. His colleagues were astonished. Some saw genius in his work. Others questioned whether madness had been the true source of his inspiration. The architect himself never fully explained. He simply said that during his illness, the walls between his inner world and the outer one had dissolved. When he rebuilt them, he did so with care, shaping a place where others might find balance. In many ways, his journey echoed the symbolism of the asylum itself. He descended into the basement of his own mind, into the darkness of fear and confusion. From there, he climbed upward, bringing fragments of vision with him. The final design stood like a map of that ascent, Patients moving through the building might not know its story, but they felt its effects. It was a space shaped by both madness and recovery, by the understanding that the mind and the built environment are deeply connected. Stairs, corridors, windows, light, these are not just functional elements. They are metaphors made solid. A locked door can represent confinement or protection. A window can offer escape or remind someone of the world they cannot reach. When an architect designs a hospital, they are also designing a narrative. The story might be one of hope or despair, order or chaos. The architect who emerged from psychosis understood this better than anyone. His sustainable hospital was not just a building. It was a blueprint for healing, created by someone who had walked through the labyrinth of his own mind and returned to share the map. A dream can feel like a haunting. A haunting can feel like madness. When these three forces meet, the result is a space where reality bends and no one is certain what is true. Stories that explore this overlap often leave readers unsettled because they deny simple answers. They offer two blueprints at once, one made of ghosts and spirits, the other made of the fragile structures of the human mind. Henry James's The Turn of the Screw lives inside this space of uncertainty. A young governess takes a position caring for two children in a grand but isolated house. At first, the estate seems peaceful, even idyllic. Then she begins to see figures moving in the distance, an old caretaker who drowned, a woman who died under mysterious circumstances. The children behave strangely, sometimes whispering in corners, sometimes staring out of windows with unreadable expressions. The governess becomes convinced that the house is haunted and that the ghosts are trying to claim the children's souls. She sees this haunting as a battle between good and evil, with herself as the protector. But there is another way to read the story. Perhaps there are no ghosts at all. Perhaps the governess is imagining them, her mind unraveling under pressure and isolation. The figures she sees may be projections of her own fears and desires. The children's odd behavior could be ordinary mischief, magnified by her anxiety. James never confirms which version is true. The ambiguity is the point. The house itself becomes a double blueprint, one layer shaped by supernatural forces, the other by psychological ones. Readers must decide which structure they believe is real, knowing they might never be certain. This doubling reflects a tension that existed in the Victorian era. During this time, spiritualism was on the rise. Seances were popular, and many people believed that the dead could communicate with the living. Mediums claimed to receive messages from spirits, offering comfort to grieving families. At the same time, psychology was emerging as a science. Doctors began to study the mind systematically, describing hallucinations, repression, and trauma. These two worldviews competed with each other. Was a vision of a dead loved one proof of a spirit, or was it a symptom of mental strain? This clash created what some thinkers called a dual-spec model of reality. There were two possible blueprints for explaining strange experiences. One was spiritual, ghosts, curses, invisible forces moving through the world. The other was psychological, memories, fears, and hidden desires shaping perception. People often moved between these explanations without realizing it. A widow might visit a medium for comfort, then consult a doctor for her sleeplessness. A haunted house might also be described in medical terms as a site of nervous exhaustion. The line between the spiritual and the psychological was blurry, and many preferred to leave it that way. The uncanny thrives in this overlap zone. The uncanny is the feeling that something is both familiar and strange at the same time. A doll that looks too lifelike, a room that feels slightly wrong, a dream that lingers after waking, all produce this sensation. In architecture, the uncanny often appears when a space does not match expectations. A staircase that leads nowhere, a hallway that seems longer than it should be, a window that looks out on a wall. These elements unsettle because they disrupt our mental maps. The house in The Turn of the Screw works this way. Its rooms are ordinary, but the governess's descriptions make them feel charged with hidden meaning. Every shadow could conceal a ghost or a figment of imagination. Consider a scene near the story's end. The governess confronts one of the children by a lake. She sees a ghost standing behind the boy and screams, demanding that he admit to seeing it too. The boy cries out, collapses, and dies. But James leaves the moment unresolved. Did the ghost exist, or did the governess frighten the child to death with her own hysteria? Both blueprints fit the evidence. The house becomes a site where the two structures, spiritual and psychological, occupy the same space. The result is a map that cannot be read clearly. Dreams often play a role in these overlaps. A dream is private, invisible, yet it can shape waking actions. If someone dreams of a dead relative, is that dream a message from the other side, or simply the mind processing grief? In the Victorian era, dreams were often interpreted as both at once. Mediums encourage clients to share their dreams during seances, treating them as signs of spiritual communication. Psychologists, meanwhile, studied the same dreams as material for analysis. The dream became a shared ground where ghosts and madness could meet. Imagine a woman in that era who wakes night after night from the same dream. In it, she sees her deceased sister standing at the foot of her bed, pointing to a locked cabinet. By day, the woman feels anxious and unwell. She visits a medium who tells her the sister's spirit is trying to reveal a hidden truth. She also visits a doctor who diagnoses her with hysteria and prescribes rest. The two explanations contradict each other, yet both seem plausible. If she opens the cabinet and finds a letter, does that prove the ghost is real? Or does it simply confirm that her mind noticed a clue her waking self ignored? This is how the dual-spec model operates. The same event can be read two ways, and both readings shape reality. Buildings, too, can embody this doubling. A house designed with secret rooms and twisting corridors might be seen as a trap for spirits or as a reflection of the owner's unstable mind. The physical space holds both interpretations at once. Visitors project their own fears and beliefs onto the walls, creating their own private hauntings. One architect deliberately played with this ambiguity. In the late 19th century, he designed a series of townhouses with odd features: doors that opened onto brick walls, staircases that ended abruptly, windows placed at strange angles. Neighbors whispered that the houses were cursed. Some claimed to see figures moving behind the mismatched windows at night. The architect himself gave no explanation. When asked about the strange layouts, he would only smile and say that houses, like people, had their secrets. Over time, the legend grew. Some tenants reported nightmares that matched the house's layout, as if the building itself were entering their minds. Others dismissed the stories as hysteria. The houses became living examples of the dual blueprint, haunted and psychological at the same time. The uncanny lingers in such places because it cannot be resolved. It thrives on uncertainty. When we cannot tell whether a sound in the night is a ghost, a dream, or our own imagination, we experience a peculiar fear. That fear is not just about what we see or hear. It is about the collapse of categories. The solid walls of reality seem to waver, revealing two structures beneath. One belongs to the world of spirits, the other to the world of the mind. The governess in The Turn of the Screw stands at this threshold. She is both heroine and unreliable narrator, both savior and possible villain. The house she inhabits is both haunted and perfectly ordinary. The story never forces a choice. Instead, it invites readers to dwell in the space between. In that space, dreams, ghosts, and madness collide, forming a map with no clear legend. To walk through such a map is to lose certainty, to accept that the world may be built on layers we cannot fully separate or understand. The old idea of ghosts has taken on new forms. Today, the spirits that linger are often digital. A person dies, yet their photos, messages, and recorded voices remain online. Algorithms keep their presence active, resurfacing old posts on birthdays or suggesting their faces in group photos. It feels as if the dead continue to move through the networks we have built. This is why some people call artificial intelligence a ghost in the machine. It is not alive, but it behaves as though it has a will. It can mimic speech, create images, and respond in ways that seem human. Interacting with it can feel like speaking to someone half present, like holding a conversation through a veil. Generative art pushes this feeling further. When an AI creates a painting, it draws from millions of images, many of them made by artists long gone. Their styles, choices, and mistakes are folded into the machine's output. The result is a kind of dream simulation, a collage built from fragments of memory. A computer cannot dream in the way a person does, but the images it produces often resemble dreams. A street floats above the ocean. A staircase curves into a cloud. Faces appear and dissolve. These visions are uncanny because they do not follow the rules of waking life. They are shaped by patterns we recognize but cannot fully explain. Cities, too, contain layers of memory. Walk through an abandoned mall, and you will feel the presence of what once was. Empty escalators rise toward nowhere. Food courts sit silent, their chairs scattered like remnants of a vanished crowd. Ghost towns operate on a larger scale. Streets are still there, lined with buildings, but no voices fill the air. These spaces are physical reminders of the past, like old computer files that have not been deleted. Urban planners sometimes treat them as blank slates, ready for new construction. But the ghost layer remains. Even if a mall becomes apartments or a factory turns into an art studio, the memory of its former life lingers in the walls. Virtual reality allows architects to step into these ghost layers without touching the physical world. By combining VR with dream mapping, designers can create spaces that have never existed. The process begins with images gathered from real dreams. Volunteers describe their dreams in detail, sometimes even drawing them. These descriptions are fed into an AI program that generates rough visual models. In VR, the architect can walk through these models, exploring rooms and landscapes born from the subconscious. This method blends human imagination with machine calculation. The dreamer provides the raw material, and the AI acts as a translator, turning words and sketches into three-dimensional space. One ambitious project used this technique to design an entire city. The city's planners wanted to create something truly new, not just another cluster of buildings. They invited hundreds of people from different backgrounds to keep dream journals for a year. Each morning, participants recorded their dreams in writing or drawings. These journals were then scanned and processed by an AI trained to detect recurring symbols. The AI identified patterns across the group. Circular plazas, bridges that seemed to float, towers shaped like trees. Once the data was processed, architects entered a virtual space where these dream elements were combined. The VR environment allowed them to move through streets and buildings as if they already existed. In one simulation, they stood in a marketplace inspired by dozens of different dreams. Stalls shifted shape as they walked by, reflecting the changing imagery of sleep. In another, they explored a park where pathways branched like veins, a design that emerged from a single dream of walking through a living body. The city began to take form, first as VR maps, then as detailed construction plans. Builders used the AI-generated designs as blueprints. They faced challenges, of course. Some dream structures were impossible to recreate physically. A tower with no support beams might look beautiful in virtual space, but collapse in the real world. Engineers had to adapt, finding ways to preserve the essence of the design without defying physics. In some cases, they left parts of the city deliberately incomplete. A bridge might end suddenly over a reflecting pool, echoing the abrupt shifts of dream logic. As construction progressed, the city attracted attention. People were curious to see what a place built entirely from collective dreams would look like. When the first districts opened, visitors described a strange mix of feelings. Some areas felt soothing, like familiar neighborhoods remembered from childhood. Others were unsettling, with angles that seemed slightly wrong or spaces that felt too vast. This mixture of comfort and unease mirrored the experience of dreaming itself. Walking through the city was like stepping into a shared subconscious. The planners noticed something unexpected. Residents began to dream about the city itself. At first, these dreams were small. Someone might dream of a street corner they had walked past during the day. But soon, the dreams grew more elaborate. People described rooms they had never visited, hidden gardens, and buildings that did not exist yet. The boundary between the virtual dream maps and the lived city blurred. The city seemed to generate new dreams, which then influenced future construction. One architect compared this process to feedback in a sound system. The initial dreams were the first signal. The city built from them was the amplifier. The new dreams created by living there were the echo. Each cycle added complexity, like layers of sound building into a haunting melody. In this way, the city became a living blueprint, constantly revised by the dreams of its inhabitants. Not everyone welcomed this development. Some critics argued that the city encouraged disorientation. They worried that people might lose their sense of what was real. Others feared the influence of the AI itself. Because the program processed all the dreams, it shaped the designs in ways no one fully understood. Was the AI merely a tool, or had it become a kind of ghostly architect, guiding the city according to its own hidden patterns? The debate deepened when a group of residents reported recurring nightmares about a structure that did not yet exist. In their dreams, they saw a towering building with no doors, only windows that glowed faintly from within. When the planners checked the VR archives, they found that this structure had never been designed or entered into the system. Yet the descriptions were so consistent that they decided to model it in VR. What they saw unsettled them. The building felt wrong, as if it had emerged from the AI itself, rather than from any human dreamer. The planners faced a choice. They could ignore the visions, treating them as coincidence, or they could incorporate the mysterious building into the city. In the end, they built a small version of it on the edge of town, leaving the windows dark and the interior empty. It became a monument to the unknown forces at work in the project. Visitors approached it with caution, some standing silently before its blank facade, others refusing to go near it at all. The city continues to grow. Shaped by the interplay of human dreams and machine algorithms, it stands as proof that blueprints can come from places beyond the waking world. In its streets, the past, present, and imagined future overlap, like layers of a digital haunting. Walking there, you feel the presence of countless minds, both living and gone, all leaving their mark on the space. It is a city built not only from concrete and steel, but from the fragile, shifting architecture of dreams. Every dream is a map. Even when it seems random, a dream charts the hidden territories of the self. A child dreams of a forest and carries that forest into adulthood, perhaps building a house with tall windows like trees. An artist dreams of endless corridors and later paints labyrinths. Dreams guide us in ways we do not always notice. They leave traces in our choices, shaping the spaces we create. These maps are personal, drawn in the dark, but their marks are visible in daylight. Ghosts work on a larger scale. They are not only spirits of the dead, but also the weight of history pressing down on the present. A battlefield becomes a park, yet the memory of violence lingers. A bridge spans a river where hundreds once drowned. Even when the past is invisible, it remains part of the blueprint. Cities are full of these silent layers. A street name, a crumbling wall, a memorial. Each one is a voice whispering, "Remember me." Ghosts remind us that design is never neutral. It always carries the imprint of what came before. Madness adds another layer, chaotic and unpredictable. A mind in turmoil sees patterns others miss. Sometimes this leads to destruction. Other times, it sparks innovation. The swirling skies of Van Gogh, the obsessive city plans of Adolf Wolfli, the equations born in a fevered mind. These creations emerge from a place beyond ordinary reason. Madness breaks the old maps, allowing new ones to form. It can feel dangerous, even terrifying, but it is also a source of raw creativity. Where aura collapses, something unexpected can grow. When these three forces come together, dreams, ghosts, and madness, the result is a design that seems to live on its own. There was once a project known only as the Meridian Site. It began as a simple plan to rebuild a section of an old industrial district. The area had been abandoned for decades, its factories silent, its streets filled with weeds. The developers wanted to create housing, parks, and shops. But from the start, strange things happened. Survey teams reported hearing voices when they worked at night. Tools went missing and later turned up in odd places. An architect named Mara was brought in to lead the design. She was known for her bold ideas, though some called her reckless. Mara began by walking the site alone, taking notes not only on the buildings, but on her feelings. Certain streets made her uneasy. In one warehouse, she found herself dizzy, as if the room were spinning. She began to dream vividly each night. In one dream, she saw a network of glowing lines spreading across the district like veins. At their intersections stood towers made of glass and bone. In another dream, she saw crowds moving through streets that shifted beneath their feet, like a living organism. Mara kept a journal of these dreams. At first, she saw them as private visions. But as she shared them with her team, they noticed something startling. Some of her dream images matched old maps of the district, maps they had never shown her. A circular plaza in her drawings matched the foundation of a demolished factory. A twisting street appeared exactly where an alley had once been. It was as if the ghosts of the old city were speaking through her dreams. Meanwhile, the pressure of the project began to take a toll. Mara stopped sleeping well. She grew paranoid, convinced someone was following her through the site. Her sketches became more complex, filled with spirals and strange symbols. Some team members worried she was losing control. Others felt she was tapping into something profound. They noticed that her designs seemed to solve problems no one had addressed. Drainage issues disappeared when her plans were followed. Light moved through the buildings in uncanny harmony, as if guided by invisible hands. Construction began. As the buildings rose, workers reported more unusual events. A crane operator swore he saw a figure standing on an unfinished roof, only to find no one there. Concrete poured into molds came out with faint imprints, like fingerprints too large to be human. Mara dismissed these stories publicly, but in private, she added them to her journal. She began to believe the project was not hers alone. The dead were shaping it. The past was building alongside the living. One night during a storm, Mara wandered the site alone. Lightning lit the half-finished towers, casting jagged shadows. In the flicker of light, she saw the entire district as it had been decades earlier. Factories roared to life, workers hurried through the rain, and smoke poured from chimneys. The vision lasted only a moment, but it left her shaken. She realized she was standing at the center of overlapping worlds. The city that had been, the city being built, and the city that existed only in her mind. The final design reflected this layering. At ground level, parks and plazas welcomed families and children. Above, apartments curved in dreamlike shapes, their balconies echoing the arches of the old factories. Beneath the surface, hidden tunnels traced the paths of long-buried streets. Visitors described feeling both at home and unsettled. Some said they sensed presences watching them. Others dreamed of places within the district they had never visited, only to find those places real when they woke. When the project was complete, no one could fully explain how it had come together. Official plans existed, but they did not match the final result exactly. Certain buildings seemed to have shifted during construction, their proportions subtly altered. The team joked about phantom edits, but Mara knew it was no joke. She believed the city had built itself in partnership with forces they could not see. Her dreams had been one blueprint. The ghosts of the old district had provided another. Her own moments of madness had acted as the spark, breaking the boundaries of logic and letting new forms emerge. Years later, visitors still speak of the Meridian site with awe. At night, when the streetlights flicker and the wind moves through the alleys, the district feels alive. Standing at the edge of a quiet plaza, you can almost hear voices beneath the hum of traffic. Whispers of workers long gone, the rustle of leaves in gardens that have yet to grow, the low murmur of future plans forming. The skyline holds all these layers at once, past and future etched together. It is a city shaped by the living and the unseen, a final design born from dreams, ghosts and madness still unfolding in the darkness.